my name is Medina Kianidi, and in this tutorial I'll show you how to make this jacket from scratch. The jacket on this render is a raw export from Marvel's Designer and it haven't been touched yet in any external application. I'll show you how to make and sew patterns together. I'll also show you how to create pockets and how we could use layers to simulate different pieces of garment on top of each other. We'll also talk about how we can freeze certain pieces of cloth to help ourselves simulating other pieces. And we'll go through some nice and useful features such as symmetry, seam taping, layer clone, and internal line tools. Finally, we'll finish by adding some seams and more geometry resolution. The workflow in this video only shows you how I do it, and by no means it's the only correct method. So let's get started. I will start by opening a scene I prepared earlier. As you can see, the scene contains a custom character that will be used in this project, and it's also provided together with this tutorial. Before we start creating our first patterns, I'll quickly go through UI and navigation. Marvel's Designer has a fairly easy UI. It has two main windows. A 3D window that is called Avatar window and is used to preview the actual simulation and our collision mesh, and a 2D window where we draw our patterns. On your right, you can find an object browser that is something like an outliner in Maya, and on the lower right, you can find the property editor that allows us to edit the properties of a selected asset. These tools on top are used to construct our 2D patterns. These icons over here are different viewport toggles that will help us to toggle the display of the avatar and the garment. And these tools are used to interact with our garment in 3D. When it comes to navigation, I'm setting my navigation controls to Maya. If you also want to do that, you can set it up by going to Settings, User Settings, View Controls, and set it to Maya. Now to rotate, you can press Alt and left mouse button. To pan, press Alt and middle mouse button. And to zoom, press Alt and right mouse button. The 2D window has the same controls to pan and zoom. Let's have a look how we can draw our first patterns. So this polygon tool that you can find over here allows us to create simple geometry shapes just by clicking on the canvas like that. The rectangle tool allows us to create rectangular shapes of different sizes and proportions. And the ellipse tool allows us to create elliptic shapes. Now to select or move the patterns, use the transform pattern tool. If you want to edit edges or points, use the edit pattern tool over here. To create curves, use the edit curves tool. And if you need to add extra points, use the Add Point tool. Now if you press Shift while dragging the components, the transformation will be snapped on horizontal, vertical, or perpendicular lines like this. If we now hit the Simulate button or press space on our keyboard, notice how the fabric starts simulating and being pulled by the gravity. Now we can start interacting with the garment by just left mouse clicking and dragging it. Let's start building our jacket. We're going to use our pattern example images as a background reference. To do that, create a big rectangle and create a new material by pressing Add. You can rename it if you want. And you can now load your pattern image as texture in the property editor. Select your pattern shape and add your new material in the fabric section. Now you can see the patterns. Scale the image up with this tool, just drag this orange handle up, like this. So we'll be using this example as a base for our jacket. And this is our sleeve shape, this is the back, and this is our front. The way I understand that this is the front is because the neckline is a bit larger. So let's start tracing our patterns with this tool. Click on the corners, press Shift to draw straight lines. Close the shape by clicking on the first point, and now start adjusting the curves. Same here, just click on the corners, close the shape, and start adjusting the curvature. Last pattern, same thing. Adjust the curves. If you want to remove any extra points, just hit delete. Now select your shapes, right click, and choose Clone as Pattern. You can now add the default fabric material, and as you can see, we just created our first patterns. You can delete this big piece for now. Let's start with these big pieces. By the way, I changed my gizmo to world coordinate instead of local. If you want to do that, you can go to Preferences, Gizmo, and Local. Change it from local to world coordinate. I think it's a bit easier to work with that. Rotate the front, position it a little bit better, and see if the scale is okay. It looks okay for now. Same thing in the 3D viewport. You want to position your patterns as close to the avatar as possible to help the simulation, but try not to intersect with your collision asset. Now we're going to mirror this piece to the other side, and you can do it by right clicking and choosing symmetric pattern. Do the same with the back piece. Mirror this piece as well by choosing symmetric pattern. And position it better in 3D. Now if you hit the simulate button, you will see that it just starts falling down. We need to start stitching the pieces together. Use this segment sewing tool to stitch the front and the back. Now if we simulate, as you can see, it's not enough, it's still falling down. Let's create a temporary collar that will help us holding the pieces together. Make a simple rectangular shape and position it close to the neck. I'm just going to change the material. Now stitch the front left part with the collar part, like that. I'm just going to make it a little bit narrower. Make a symmetric copy, symmetry paste, just like you did before. Stitch the other side. And stitch the middle part. Do exactly the same thing in the back. Connect the pieces together. Mirror it and connect the other side. Now let's connect the collar from the sides. Now if you don't know which parts need to be connected with which, you can click in 3D viewport and you will see a blue dot, and the same blue dot will appear in the 2D window, and this way you know which parts need to be connected. Press simulate, and now as you can see, the garments are being simulated on top of the avatar. Let's connect the sides. Now if you press if you press this red icon here, you will be able to see the stretching. So the red areas is essentially very stretched fabric, and it's probably quite small. So now you can start scaling the patterns up a little bit. Let's have a look at the sleeves. Reset its original position by right-clicking and selecting Reset 2D Arrangement Selected. You will know which part is the front line and which part is the back line by the length. The front line is a little bit shorter. Press Shift-Z to see the length size. Position it in 3D. Make sure your normals are not flipped. Connect the front parts. Like we did before, click on the 3D viewport to see where the blue dots are and connect those edges. Hit Simulate. Now, as you can see, we have an artifact. This is because the stitching is reversed. To fix it, select the stitching with the Select Stitching tool, right-click and click Reverse. Sew the sleeve to itself. Now you can check the stretching. As you can see, it's a little bit stretched. Now the front jacket pattern is a little bit larger than the actual sleeve, so we need to scale the sleeve a bit more. So you need to make sure that these lines, the front line of the sleeve and the front line of the front pattern of the jacket is the same. That should work. Now mirror the sleeve by choosing symmetric paste. And now we need to stitch the parts. All right. Now you don't need the collar anymore, you can delete it. and hit simulate button to look at the neckline. Well, that's pretty good. Make sure that all your normals are facing outwards. Select this button over here. So here we have our sleeves being flipped. Just select them, right click, and flip normals. Let's proceed to the hood. Select these patterns, right click, and choose freeze. Freezing will prevent the patterns from simulating. Now, just like we did before, create a big rectangular shape and add the material that holds the pattern texture. Start tracing the shape. Just like before, don't worry about the curves, just click on the main corners. So this piece on the bottom should be the middle part of the hood. Press Shift to draw straight lines. Close the shape and adjust the curves. Copy them as patterns. Now position the shapes better both in 2D window and in your 3D window. Let's have a look how we can attach the hood to our jacket. So we want to attach this back part of the hood to the back side of the jacket. Just gonna move it closer to the attachment area. And this bottom part here should be partially attached to the front part of the jacket and to the top part of the sleeve here. It's good to check the length line. So with this line selected, you can see the total length line here. So it's about 25.4. And this bottom line is about 29.8 units, which is fairly close. Let's attach the back. So here the back patterns of the jacket have 2 units, but then the back part of the hood has only 1. So let's split it. Right click, select split, and choose Uniform Split. That will add a point exactly in the middle. Now you can start sewing, like that. Let's look at the front. So this line should be connected here. And then these two lines should be connected here. Check the line length. So this is about 13 and this is about 14.3. You can move the point slightly to get it closer to the sleeve length. So here I'm clicking in 3D so I can understand which parts need to be connected. So again, same thing like with the back, we have two edges that need to be connected to one here. So I'm going to split it. Now this time I'm going to look at this length, which is 5.8, and I'm going to edit the line 1 to 5.8 as well. Hit OK. Now you can start connecting it. Make sure the sewing is correct. Connect the front. Now we can mirror it. And repeat the sewing on the other side. Connect the hood parts together. Now we can hit simulate. Alright. I'm going to undo the simulation real quick. I want to try to simulate on top of Avatar's head instead of the shoulders. This way I can inspect the stitching around the neck a bit better. To force the garment falling on the head, I'm going to add a pin. Just hold the W key and click on top of the hood. Now you can click and drag the pin to the position you need it, like that. Hit simulate. Now you can remove the pin by holding the W key and clicking on the pin again. Connect the front as well. I'm going to add a different type of fabric on the hood. Something a bit more rigid so that it can hold the shape a bit better. Add a new material, a new fabric. Just gonna make it a bit darker so it's easier to see. Select your hood patterns and add your new material. Select your material and change the fabric type to this leather. Now we can start polishing our neckline. I think the front part of the hood is a little bit too long, so I'm gonna make it a little bit shorter. Now, because the parts were symmetrically pasted, you only need to edit one side. I'm going to unfreeze the jacket. Select it, right-click and activate it. I'm going to simulate the whole thing together to see how it looks. At this moment I think the jacket is a little bit short. I'm gonna freeze the sleeves and try and make the jacket a little bit longer. The reason I'm freezing the sleeves is so that they don't simulate while I'm working on the torso area. It's basically so that I don't have to think about them. Now I want to try and make a little bit more interesting shape on the back. Make it a little bit longer, like this. And adjust the curvature a little bit. Make sure that this curve is continuous. Let's look at the hood neckline again. Now I want to add the same material to the whole thing. So I'm just gonna select everything, add this material, and I'm going to choose leather. At this point it could be any preset really, but I find leather a little bit easier to work with. It's a bit more rigid than the default preset. So here in the back neck area we have a slight line mismatch. Basically we need to try and make the hood bottom line here a little bit longer. You can just select a point and move it. To be a little bit more precise, you can start snapping to grid. Just right click and snap to grid, like that. I'm just going to unfreeze the sleeves a little bit. That looks good. Alright. Now that we're happy how the hood is connected to the jacket, we can start pulling it down. I'm going to select the jacket and freeze it. Hit the simulate button and start dragging it down, like that. You can also toggle the avatar visibility off if it's hard to see. So what I need to do is I need this line to be as rigid as possible. So basically it's this line's here. To make them more rigid, I'm going to use this seam taping tool. Select this tool and click on the lines. So these lines now have a thick orange outline, and if you simulate, you'll see that they become a little bit more rigid. You can now select these lines and adjust the seam taping width in the property editor. I'm setting the width to 20 to make it a bit thicker. You can try changing the preset and see if it gives you better results. Do the same on the middle part. Now we can start just dragging and tweaking it till we get a desirable shape. I want the hood to be a little bit more structural, so I'm going to try and add hard material here and see if it can force the shapes for me instead of tweaking. So I want a rounder shape here. I'm going to force it down a little bit and maybe add a pin. Same on the other side. And I'm going to add a few pins here just to preserve this nice round area. Now you can switch your fabric type back to your old one. Hit simulate. And now you can remove any pins that create unnecessary stretching. When you're happy with the shape, just add a few more pins to preserve the shapes. At this stage, I'm happy with the shape of the hood, so I'm going to freeze it. And I'm going to start polishing the main shapes of the jacket. So select the jacket, activate it. So what I want to do at this stage is, before adding complexity and extra layers and pockets to this jacket, I want to be absolutely happy with the big shapes first. I'm going to add a slightly darker material to the torso area. This is not a necessary step, it's just I'm doing it to help myself visualizing the final design, basically, making it easier on the eyes. So I would like to make every seam area a little bit more rigid. We're going to use the same tool like we used on the hood. Select the seam taping tool and double click on one of the lines. That should add taping on the whole perimeter of the pattern. Hit simulate. Oh, it looks a bit better. Now I want to add a little detail in the back area. So a little cut like this. To do that, I'm going to add a point, delete the original sewing, and re-sew the upper lines together. The lower lines will be disconnected. Adjust the curves a little bit better. And that looks nice. At this point, I'm pretty happy with the base, and now it's a good time to start adding some details on top. So I would like to add a zipper cover like this, and a couple of pockets. Maybe something between this and this design should work. I'm going to use the rectangle tool, and I'm going to draw only one half, the left half of the pattern. Adjust the length. So since this top piece of garment is covering both the front jacket pattern and the hoodie, the total length should be a sum of these two lines. So this is around 70.3. So I'm just going to adjust the length to get as close as possible. Now I want to add a point at 7.93 units on line 1. Like this. So now we have the same line length. And now you can select this edge, right click and hit unfold, and you will get it mirrored to the other side. So the width of one half is 245, so I need to add a point on one half of the jacket at 245 as well. Add 245 on line 1, like that. And I'm going to do the same on the hood part. And now choose this internal line tool. Just gonna turn off snap to grid and draw a straight line. Hold down shift like this. Do the same here. So now we can sew the stop pattern with the internal line. So the points that we were adding before were mainly for the reference. I'm going to freeze the jacket so I only simulate the garment on top. So the lines were automatically added to the other side because the other side is symmetrically pasted. Do the sewing on the other side. Hit simulate. Just going to change the color so it's easier to see. Alright, that looks good. Now let's activate these frozen chunks and see how our new layer is interacting with our base. Just going to set our preset to leather as well. Let's add some seam taping on this new chunk as well. You can also just double click it to add the taping everywhere. Let's make some pockets. Use the internal rectangle tool and add the rectangular shape. Move this shape somewhere where you think your pockets should be. At this point it's good to check your reference. I would like the length to be like on this reference, but then the thickness of the pocket to be like this one. When you're happy with the shape, select it, right-click and choose Clone as Pattern. That will create a new pattern based on the internal shape that you just created. Here I'm adding a bit of a brighter color so that it's easier to see and positioning it a bit better in both 3D and 2D windows. Connect these lines together and before simulating, freeze the main shape. I want to create a small fold to give it a bit more thickness, so I'm going to select this edge, hit unfold, I'm going to make an internal line here. Now you can adjust the fold angle to help it bend. Select the line and set the fold angle to 0. Now you can see it's bending. Stitch the top part to itself. And do the same on the bottom. Now we can connect the top and the bottom to the jacket. Now there is a little bit of a problem here. Let's connect this edge to this one. Set the internal line back to 180 so we can get rid of the sharp line. You could also just delete this line if you don't want any sharp edges, but I prefer leaving it on, because if you remove it, you're gonna have a jagged edge there. This is caused due to the lack of geometry. As you can see here, we don't have enough geometry to support that line. But if you have the internal line there, then you're gonna have that edge. I'm going to add a little bit more resolution to this chunk by adjusting the particle distance. The lower the number, the more geometry you're gonna have. Mirror this chunk using symmetric pattern. And attach it to the other side. Here I attached the edges in the wrong way, so we need to select the sewing and reverse it, so the lines should be straight. I'm just going to save real quick, so when you save, try to save as project. I'm going to add a little bit of an angle to the pockets. For the sleeves, let's try and make them a little bit more interesting by adding a small detail like this. Now I'm going to freeze everything except for the sleeves. Okay, so we want this chunk to come from the inside of the sleeve. So I'm just gonna click in 3D to see where it should be. Just like we did with the pockets, I'm going to use the internal line first, and I'll try to make the shape that I need. You can see it displaying here in the 3D viewport. Adjust the shape a bit closer to your reference. I accidentally added a curve here. To remove it, just select one of the handles and hit delete. Select it, right click, choose clone as pattern. Connect these lines. So if it looks like it haven't been attached, this is probably because the internal line sits just on top of the edge of the pattern. So if that happens, then just move it a bit further away from the edge. Make sure the sewing is not flipped. Now attach the other side. That looks good. I'm going to add a hard material there so that the shape holds itself a bit better. Symmetric paste and do the same on the other side. At this point, all the additional layers on top are done. I'm going to freeze the sleeves and start adding complexity to the middle part of the jacket. So activate it. I'm just going to hide this front bit. You can right click and deactivate it. That will prevent this chunk from simulating. And I'm also going to hide it so that it's not in the way. I want to add some seams here in the middle, maybe one here and one going like this and one like this, just to make it a little bit less boring. So I'm going to use the internal line and hold down Shift and click on one of the sides. I'm going to put the pockets a little bit lower. Activate the pockets and resimulate to update their position. Add another line here. And let's add a perpendicular line that runs from here to here. So now, because the chunks are symmetrically pasted, I'm not getting the result I want. So at this stage, I'm going to right click and remove linked editing. You can now use this line as a reference and draw a new internal line. Delete the old lines. And I want these points to be connected, so I'm going to eyeball the position a little bit. Select all the lines you just made and right click and choose Cut and Sew. The pattern now is split into 4 chunks instead of 1. Later on we're gonna add some internal lines around each chunk, and you'll see that the seams will look quite good, especially when you add more resolution. Another benefit of cutting it into chunks is that now you can start adding a completely new material to each of those chunks and control the physical properties of the fabric separately. I'm just gonna add a slightly darker color to the sleeves. This step is not necessary for our construction. I'm just switching some colors to make it prettier on my eyes. Alright, so now we have a very good base, so we can start adding even more details to our jacket. We're gonna start enhancing the seams by adding an internal line. So to do that, just select these edges, right click and choose Offset as internal line. So that adds an extra line around our edges, so that will look like a double seam in the end. Let's add this internal offset to all of these front chunks. Same on the back pieces. That looks good. This edge, these lines here, could use an internal line also. Just going to delete these pins to remove the stretching. Since I removed most of my pins, I'm just gonna freeze this back chunk to hold the shape of the hood a little bit. I want to make sure that this chunk will always stay on top of the jacket when simulating. To do that, I'm going to use layers. I'm going to set a layer number higher than the rest of the jacket. So the whole jacket is at layer 0, and this chunk is now set to layer 1. Alright, so now we have a very good shape, and we can start adding even more complexity by adding an extra layer of fabric on top. Select the whole thing and choose Layer Clone Over. That will create a copy of the whole jacket and position it on top of your existing jacket. Before we hit the Simulate button, it's a good idea to freeze the layer underneath. So we need to try and preserve the inner shape as much as possible. So just like before, I want to set this chunk on a higher layer than the layer underneath. So since the layer underneath had already a layer 1, I'm going to set this layer to layer 2. And then the rest of the jacket can be set to layer 1 instead of layer 0. Basically, everything that sits on top is set on a number higher than the garment underneath. Hit the Simulate button and check if you have any artifacts at this point. So I do have some artifacts here and there that could be caused by the lack of resolution, so I'm going to select this whole top layer and give it a particle distance of 10. I also don't think we need a second layer of fabric on these little pieces, so I'm just going to delete it. Simulate again. That looks a bit better. We forgot to set these little chunks on a layer higher. Same principle as the zipper cover. So set it on layer 2. Now works. Now I'm going to inspect all the problem areas one by one. We have some problems here around our zipper cover. Let's check our patterns. So when we were offsetting the internal lines, we generated some extra lines here. So I'm just going to select unnecessary lines and delete them. So the problem is still there. I think this is because the bottom layer is still frozen. So I'm just going to unfreeze every chunk one by one. That looks like it fixes it. So once you're satisfied, select the bottom layer and freeze it back again. Repeat the same thing on the other side. Same workflow on the middle parts, just unfreeze the bottom layers and resimulate. Same workflow with the zipper cover. Try to select the bottom layer and unfreeze it. And I'm gonna do the same on this side of the hood. Let's look at the sleeves. So I think the bottom layer of this little chunk was still set on layer 0. We need to set it on a layer higher than our outer sleeve. So set it to layer 2. And then the most top chunk should now be higher than 2, so set it to layer 3. If the simulation is struggling to push the chunks out, you can just select them and force move them out and resimulate again. So now it looks like all the problem areas are fixed and we're very close to our final look. I'm going to select the bottom layer and just make sure that it's frozen. And as a last step, we're going to add some more fabric on the most outer layer of the jacket. To do that, we need to create some excessive fabric, and I'm going to alter shrinkage weft and shrinkage warp. I'm going to set it higher than 100%, maybe 103. Activate these chunks and hit the simulate button. Alright, so it's instantly looking much more interesting than it was before. As a final step, I want to resimulate this outermost layer of the jacket with the new fabric preset. So I'm just going to add one type of fabric to the whole thing, and I'm going to set the preset to this lightweight nylon. And let's give it some more geometry. Decrease the particle distance to give it a bit more resolution. If you think that the wrinkles start getting a little bit noisy, you can always set the preset back to something a little bit more rigid and simulate for a few seconds. Alright, this concludes our tutorial. I think this is a good place to call our asset done. So last thing, I just wanted to highlight how useful it is to fix your big main shapes first before jumping into details. So try to stay patient and take care of the large shapes first. So that's basically it. I hope you found this tutorial useful, and thanks for watching.